What is up, you guys? Welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, just welcome. My name is Gemma Jade, but today we are going to be discussing a darker side to abduction and seeding programs. Now, as you can see, I am still trying to get the background situation configured and figured out. Thank you for your patience there and bearing with me. I've talked about hybrid and seeding programs at length here on this channel, and it seems to be something a lot of people are interested in, but that few are actually speaking on. There's an aspect to it that I've come across recently in my research that I was kind of aware of in the periphery of my thoughts, but that didn't really strike or occur to me until one of the last videos I did on abductions and hybrids. That is the aspect of lost pregnancies and vanishing fetuses. I know it seems like it would otherwise be a sensitive topic, but I want you guys to remain focused that we are specifically discussing abductions here and not anything else. I guess let's consider this your trigger warning, okay? So I'm not going to start with my usual corny, silly introduction to whatever the subject at hand is, because I do realize the sensitivity of the issue. Let's jump right in on the darker side to abduction and seeding programs. The fact that there are so many women who have come forward not only claiming to have been abducted, but also claiming to have experienced spontaneous pregnancy afterwards, but also, and however long, usually a few months, those same women are also coming forward and claiming to have just woken up one day not pregnant anymore. I'm trying to be careful to avoid specific words here, but there is no sign, rhyme, or reason except the fetus simply isn't there anymore. More often than not, too, the women say this happens right after yet another abduction. This phenomenon is one of, if not the least reported aspect to the abduction phenomenon, and that's why, for the most part at least, the general public isn't even vaguely aware that any of this is happening. See, a lot of time when someone is abducted, and we discuss this quite often here under a multitude of different abduction scenarios, the memory of the event or events is wiped or somehow screened otherwise by the extraterrestrials themselves for whatever reason. However, it's like the trauma of the event makes many of these women, their partners as well, want to try and forget and not speak on the situation at all. This is not only for the overall fear of being ridiculed by the public at large, as we all know how it goes with most people when they report this type of thing having happened to them, but also because of the trauma of the experience. It's like they just want to forget it and move on, and perhaps don't care enough or don't want to deal with whatever actually happened and or the implications of what was happening or what it means. I hope that makes sense. Is it that somehow the ETs know that the human beings involved aren't going to want to talk about it publicly, or do they not understand, because of how they only understand emotion as a concept, that they don't even bother trying to use their usual methods on these particular abductees? There are some who think that the ETs do this on purpose, leaving the memories raw, in order for them to be able to monitor the human subjects and try to understand the extreme emotions and emotional trauma that comes with the loss of a pregnancy. This thought train could easily lead down a dark and fascinating rabbit hole, so I'll try my best to simplify. We know that when this happens, it's because the child will be a hybrid, and therefore the extraterrestrial will definitely be visiting the human being or human beings once again, and perhaps they feel as though the child/fetus is their property as well, and again, don't understand the trauma and everything they're causing. Some people simply believe they are callous cold and don't care, but I really don't think that's the case. Emotion only as a concept, all emotion, are the very reason that, at least in my humble opinion, this theory cannot possibly be true. Unfortunately, medical doctors, psychiatrists, psychologists, etc. are on board, or seem to be, with the simple miscarriage scenario each and every time, and it seems, whether purposefully or not, they simply don't even want to consider the idea of extraterrestrials or abductions in general. There are a few therapists that specialize in abduction experiences that the victims could go to, but again, the fear of ridicule and the shame most often overwhelm them, and they spend their lives grief-stricken and suffering in silence. One of the worst parts about it is the fear these couples or women alone deal with when worrying that it will happen again and again every time they get pregnant, and unfortunately, they're almost always absolutely correct. I don't have enough research yet to understand whether or not the extraterrestrials usually come in and take the fully human child of, for example, a couple who purposely became pregnant after trying to conceive. So will they come in and take a fully human child with a human mother and father if they feel that they have some kind of ownership of the human specimen, right? That's kind of the question I was asking myself. My gut instinct, from what I do know from the research I've done and the information I have compiled, they usually don't, but they do continuously use the same women/couples for seeding and hybrids, so sometimes there's not even a chance to get pregnant naturally by our own human means. Is this done on purpose by the extraterrestrials, or again, do they simply not understand the implications of what they're doing and what they're putting their human subjects through? More often than not, the extraterrestrials, who we have come to know as the Greys, are the ones who are doing this with the hybrids in this way. Many extraterrestrial races have seeding and hybrid programs, but the alien Greys are the ones who seem to be mainly, almost always, responsible for the missing fetuses and spontaneous pregnancies, at least as far as people who have come forward in what the research says. There is a man who came up in my source material named Brett Oldham. Brett wrote a book called Children of the Greys, and in it he details his lifelong experiences with the Greys and what they put him through during the many times he was abducted throughout his lifetime. He said that he can attest to the psychological, physical, and emotional scars and traumas that come from such experiences. He said that he has been having experiences with the Greys specifically since he was 5 years old and still has abductions and other experiences happening to him to this very day. He also claimed to have been subjected to medical and sexual procedures and experiments, even with his mind and mentality. He explains in the book the deep empathy he has for the women who deal with these sorts of abductions by these extraterrestrials. He describes the acts being done by these beings as, quote, cold and heartless. I don't want to say that I fully disagree here, guys, because I cannot imagine what these people and all abductees who are prone to these experiments that are actually, at least a lot of the time, bad and horrible and terrible enough that should another human being do this, we would call it something else. We would call it torture if a human was doing it to other humans. However, I will say that I'm not actually sure cold and heartless are the right terms because, again, and I'm sorry if I'm being too repetitive, these beings do not understand emotion outside of the general concept of it. Guys, I am definitely not excusing or downplaying the trauma, and I'm sure the anguish that goes along with the abductions where they're experimenting, but I just want to try and keep the separation front and center. They more than likely don't realize how cold and heartless what they're doing is, and honestly probably don't even understand what those words mean. They're basically emotionless as far as what I understand and as far as how we humans feel and deal with them. In Brett's book, there's a chapter titled The Baby Takers, and I'm going to retell an experience from it in my own words, of course. It's a personal experience that happened to him and his girlfriend at the time, and I want to make sure you know this came from his book, and the book sounds so interesting, I cannot wait to read it. It's actually number 3 on my list of books I inadvertently ended up using as source material through articles, and I want to make sure credit is given where credit is due. Anyways, let's move on to the encounter/experience. Brett says his girlfriend was about a week away from her 4th month of pregnancy. The pregnancy was progressing completely normally and everything was great. The baby was healthy and growing strong. Her last doctor appointment with her OBGYN had been a week before this encounter happened. He said he and his pregnant girlfriend were awoken one night in the middle of the night to a very loud bang. Our witness jumped up to see what was happening and saw 4 gray aliens just standing there in his bedroom. 3 of them surrounding the bed and 1 standing further back near the master bathroom. He explains that he and she were both abducted by these 4 extraterrestrials faster than either of them could have had any sort of reaction, or really before either one really even knew or could comprehend what was going on. The next day, he realized the aliens had knocked a typewriter down, most likely accidentally, and that's what the loud bang that initially woke them up was. Most likely the extraterrestrials did not want to wake them up, not that it really matters with the ease with which they can completely paralyze and incapacitate us. Once abducted, they were both placed in the same room and our victim was only able to move his head, with the rest of his body being completely paralyzed. This is where it starts to get really evil, at least in my opinion. He claims that he was looking over at his girlfriend and immediately realized that they were extracting the baby from her womb. He turned his head and claimed one of the Greys took their hand and turned his head back, forcing him to watch the procedure. Brett explained, quote, "The mental control these aliens have on you is beyond description. I could not resist their desire to have me watch the procedure. She was hysterical and begging them to stop. I was overcome with rage," end quote. Of course, the two of them woke up in their bed the next day and his girlfriend spotted some blood on their sheets. She went to the bathroom to check and confirmed she was, quote, "bleeding some," end quote, and told Brett to call her doctor immediately. When she got to the OBGYN's office, they told her what most likely had happened was that she had lost the baby. Now, I don't want to get into specific details here because even though I am covering this in the most neutral and respectful way I think I possibly can, YouTube, as I often tell you guys, has been being very harsh on creators who don't make them a ton of money each month, so please try and stay with me here. The doctor sent the both of them across the street to the hospital for her to have a clean out, and that's the best way I can put it without using the actual words. Brett's mother went to sit with him and wait, and he said that when the procedure was done and the doctor was walking down the hall toward him and his mother, he looked worried and even a bit scared. The doctor did. His facial expression wasn't neutral as it should have been. It was kind of off somehow, according to Brett. This is a fairly common procedure for a woman to have, especially after the loss of a pregnancy. So this made our witness quite nervous, and he asked the doctor if everything was okay. The doctor replied that his girlfriend was fine, but that he, quote, "had never seen anything like it," end quote, as he scratched his head and wrinkled his brow. The doctor went on to explain, quote, "There was no tissue at all in the womb. It was completely clean. If I hadn't just examined her, I would think that this woman had never been pregnant. I can't explain it," end quote. As the doctor turned and walked away, Brett looked at his mother and said, somewhat out of the blue and surprising even himself, quote, "They took it," end quote. He said that though he had instant recall at that moment of everything that had occurred the night before during the abduction, he was too emotionally drained to really explain it all at that time. All of this had happened in the 1980s, and Brett said he found out later on in life that his girlfriend also had remembered everything. They decided it was for the best for them to only tell very few, very trusted friends and family members, but to otherwise keep it quiet, again, for fear of ridicule. This right here, guys, is how these extraterrestrials who are doing these horrible, terrible, horrific things, whether they understand what they're doing or not, are able to continue doing it for generations as far as we know, and most likely for millennia or the beginning of time as far as my psychic knowing and general knowledge go. This isn't a new phenomenon. It's ancient. Brett and this poor girl figured no one would believe them and hoped they'd now be left alone since the beings had, quote, "got what they wanted," end quote. However, recently, somewhere around 2012, he was contacted by the show Monsters and Mysteries in America. Side note, this show is where I first learned about the Black Eyed Kids and where my obsession began in 2014. Also, they have a great full episode on the MIB. Okay, so Brett was asked to come on the show and talk about the abduction experiences he had had, more specifically the event where they took the fetus from his girlfriend more than 30 years previously. He found out his now ex-girlfriend was also interviewed, and the producers of the show told him she had remembered almost the exact same thing as he did, even though neither had spoken of it since they were together in the 80s, and neither had spoken to one another in about as long. Brett's point in explaining this was to show that the extraterrestrials made absolutely zero attempt to try and either wipe or screen the memory of the horrible and callous things that had happened to each of them that night. He firmly and fully believes the reason for this is their intense and deep interest in and study of intense human emotions, such as the ones brought on immediately and then over time in our witness and his now ex-girlfriend as well. They were forcing him to watch her go through this, knowing there was absolutely nothing he could do about it, and then watching and studying them long term in order to possibly better understand their concept of humanity and our vast range of extreme emotions. This could and most likely does all go back to, guys, to what I've been bringing to you all and discussing with you at length for the past year or so, and that's the emotional vampirism and extraterrestrial feeding. I did a few videos on it a little while ago, and I will try to remember to put the iCards in the corner of the screen up there. But if you don't see them there, they will be in the description box. I certainly recommend checking them out so you can have a better understanding of what it is I'm talking about here, although I will go into it a little bit. Brett's book was published not too long after his segment on the show aired. He explains that the cover of his book depicts a small hybrid female whom the Greys had introduced him to. It didn't take long for people all over the world to start contacting him and relating to his experiences, particularly the one from the fateful night when they forced him to watch them take what he thought was his baby out of his girlfriend's body. I assume he loved her deeply, and this had to have torn him apart. The people contacting Brett about all of this were from all walks of life, and many of them were your average, normal human being working regular jobs. Nothing seemingly unique or really extraordinary about them. Not on the surface anyway, as all of them had been keeping these horrible experiences to themselves, mainly and mostly for fear of ridicule. I mean, they were flight attendants, doctors, teachers, and lawyers, and they would possibly risk unemployment and losing everything they've worked for their whole lives had they even mentioned what had happened to them. It's disgusting and it makes me so angry, but I do believe wholeheartedly that the extraterrestrials realize that most human beings will do this, and therefore they are able to leave the memories in extreme detail completely intact in order to continue on with not only the stealing of fetuses, but of their work in trying to comprehend and study our intense and very wide range of emotions. While that's just my opinion, guys, it's definitely not an uncommon or unpopular one. Let me know what you all think in the comments below, please. But as always, be respectful. And remember, someone who has been through a similar trauma could be there in the comments reading them. Brett stated about the people contacting him, quote, "They were police, flight attendants, teachers, lawyers, and so on. They were regular, everyday people who could be your neighbor. You would never know that these horrible things had been done to them. Just like I did for so many years, they were keeping quiet. Most of them hadn't even told immediate family members. They had no one to turn to for help. All of them lived in fear of ridicule. They feared they would lose their jobs or be diagnosed with some severe mental illness and placed under the care and supervision in a mental health facility," end quote. Brett then goes on to include some of the cases and experiences of the people he was communicating with. He tells of one woman who got in touch with him who said she had become mysteriously pregnant when she was just a teenager. Her parents were furious, and of course they didn't believe her when she was just as shocked and confused as they were and insisted she had never had sex before. This woman explained that she too had had her fetus taken from her at approximately 12 weeks during an abduction, and that she too was awake and alert during the entire experience, and she was also made to remember the entire harrowing and traumatizing event. The very next day, she told her parents what had happened with having been abducted and the fetus being stolen from her womb by the extraterrestrials. They had her committed to a mental institution or mental health facility. Ladies and gentlemen, this right here is still the unfortunate and devastating reality in which we all live. Many of the people who came forward and contacted Brett with their encounter stories all were reporting almost the exact same thing. Some of them even claimed they were abducted again and made to spend time with, or were at the very least introduced to, hybrid children that either looked just like them or closely resembled somehow the hybrid child on the cover of his book. Were they all made to meet this child, every single one of them who were a part of this seeding / fetus stealing project? And if so, what role does she play? Some women even claim to have had more than one, and even in some cases, several fetuses taken from them throughout the course of their lives. There's another element to all of this too, guys, and Brett said that so many people, himself included, who have had multiple abduction experiences throughout their lives also report forced sexual encounters with hybrids. Many of the women claim to have been sexually assaulted, then becoming pregnant from it, and then, eventually at around 12 weeks pregnant, having the fetus forcibly and surgically removed during yet another abduction experience. See, here is where it gets a bit complicated, because most of the time when we hear about abduction encounters, when it comes to the hybrids in seeding programs at least, we hear about the painful and almost torturous removal of sperm or eggs from the human subject, and a lot of the time in those cases, the person will only remember after a while. Those memories, in some or maybe even in most cases, are wiped or screened. Brett explained after speaking on the fact that the sexual attacks and experiments happen more often than the general public believes or knows about. He goes on to say that it is much more than hybrid and seeding too, saying, quote, "The concept and study of human sexuality and emotions plays heavy into the equation of the Greys' interest in us," end quote. He finishes the article with, quote, "The aliens we call the Greys are creating an alien/human hybrid species. The Greys are interested in the human body as a physical specimen. They are interested in human sexuality and our emotional makeup. Obviously, I've witnessed and experienced much more than I can relate in this short article. Countless others all over the planet have too, but are too afraid to come out publicly with their stories. Alien abductions are real, as is their hybridization program. The full implications of both remain to be seen," end quote. That's from Mysterious Universe. If you guys want to check out Brett's book, Children of the Greys, you can purchase it on Amazon, and I'm still looking for the episode of Monsters and Mysteries in America that features his remarkable and fascinating story. Moving away just a little bit from the seeding and hybrids, let's discuss for a moment what we basically already know, and possibly what some of us don't, when it comes to alien abductions. There is definitely a fast-growing and widespread belief in the ufology field and in this community in general when the subject comes up, and that's that these entities from some faraway place or alternate dimension/parallel universe, etc., depending on what you believe, are kidnapping human beings against our will and doing all sorts of sexual and intimately invasive experiments on us for the purpose of genetic research and/or hybridization programs. The list is too long to put here in terms of the reasons people think they may be doing this, and they are very varied and quite widespread. However, this is not the only reason we believe these entities and beings, sometimes they even look more like what I would call or define as creature, are doing this, and not by a long shot either. Let's take a look at something else we have discussed on this channel at great length throughout quite a few videos, because it just keeps coming up in the research, and it's fascinating to me, and I think to most of you as well, at least from what I can tell. Whitley Strieber and his book Communion. This book, in my opinion, is one of the main ones that brought abductions to light and to the forefront of this community especially, at least again in my opinion, and in a bit of a different way than what we were used to. Up until the release of that book, and as far as I know, Betty and Barney Hill and their experience was what most of the general public at large and so-called experts in this community considered not only the norm, but the end-all and be-all of abduction experiences. The missing time, the sexual invasions of our body, weird substances, and strange men dressed in black. That encounter has it all, or so we thought it did. By we, I mean human beings as a collective, as I wasn't born when any of this was happening back in the 1960s. Whitley brought to the public's attention, or at least to the attention of those who would listen, that there seems to be much more than some otherworldly scientists out there coming like thieves in the night to experiment on us and harvest our reproductive tissues and things. Communion, as well as Whitley's other books, goes much deeper into the reported abduction experiences and how they very well could connect with all of the ancient texts and even hieroglyphs, which spoke about these otherworldly creatures like the Fae and other magical and mystical beings and beasts. I've done a few videos on whether or not I personally believe there is any kind of real connection here. But whether we believe it or not, it is definitely not something we should ignore altogether, as how could we ever make an educated decision without having all of the information available at our disposal? It's certainly thought-provoking. I mean, that's for sure. It goes back to that very common and often debated question. Could it be that when these ancient people and civilizations were seeing these gods coming from the sky, and even the reports where they are said to have given us technology and helped us along our path to humanity, they were actually seeing and being visited by these same races of extraterrestrials we are becoming so familiar with today? Absolutely, I say, but you guys let me know what you all think in the comments below, please. Of course, as time goes on and more people come forward with their own experiences and encounters with these same extraterrestrial beings, our theories and thought processes involving them seem to evolve. Or at least they should, right? There was a man who had some fascinating theories and ideas who unfortunately passed away before his time in 2009, named Mac Tonnies. At the point of his untimely demise, Mac was working on something called crypto-terrestrials. He firmly believed that these otherworldly visitors might not even be from outer space. This is quite the belief, but he has some pretty interesting information that, in some people's minds, backs up his seemingly otherwise outrageous claims. He firmly believed, at least from what I could tell, and I am not familiar enough with his work yet to really say, but we are simply exploring here, right? Let him explain it in his own words. Easier. According to Mysterious Universe, he told Nick Redfern, quote, "I regard the alleged hybridization program with skepticism. How sure are we that these interlopers are extraterrestrial? It seems more sensible to assume that the so-called aliens are human, at least in some respects. Indeed, descriptions of intercourse with aliens fly in the face of exobiological thought. If the crypto-terrestrial population is genetically impoverished, as I assume it is, then it might rely on a harvest of human genes to augment its dwindling gene pool. It would be most advantageous to have us believe we're dealing with omnipotent extraterrestrials rather than a fallible sister species," end quote. I firmly, wholeheartedly, and absolutely believe that, at least when it comes to the Greys, they are doing what they're doing exactly for those above-mentioned reasons. However, the rest of it, I'm not so sure, but I reiterate, it's definitely worth considering and added together with all of the other information we think we know is absolute in actual fact, which, let's face it, we actually know nothing for certain when it comes to this type of research. He definitely could have been onto something there, or not. I don't know. Another person we've discussed at length throughout quite a few videos here on this channel is Dr. John Mack. This is where a lot of the soul reaping information comes in, and he reported all of this throughout most of what he published because in his research he found so many people who reported black-eyed creatures who reeked of malevolence and evil, who they believe collectively and individually, despite none of them knowing the other and being from all over the world in all walks of life, are trying to steal or reap their very souls, and that was the actual reasoning behind the individual abductions. Not the harvesting or whatever of their DNA like most people, myself included, tend to think. I think it's some kind of mixture of both with so much more thrown in there depending on the type of gray and the species of extraterrestrial in general. Nick Redfern said that while researching for his book Final Events, he spoke to numerous government agents across multiple agencies who believe 100% that extraterrestrials are actually demons. Now, I do have a little side note here, guys, and it's not going religious, so please don't take this as an invitation for religious debate in the comments, though discussions are obviously acceptable. Just respect one another, yourselves, and me too. So, I have an issue with the word demon because that brings to mind the Christian version of what that entity allegedly is. I am a devout Christian and choose to worship Jesus Christ, but because of my abilities, I also know there has been a lot of abuse when it comes to human beings and the interpretation of not only the Bible, but other holy books as well. There is no one religion, and while I understand the word and entity demon in concept, I normally only use that word or term for lack of a better one. So okay, rant done, moving on. Based on this demon theory, abduction experiences are nothing more than mere illusions of sophisticated holographic technology. And in reality, we only think we are dealing with extraterrestrials of any kind, and any sort of abduction from and or by any entity that's otherworldly or from, for lack of a better term again, outer space, are actually the minions of Satan himself, and it's how they're able to get in and possibly possess us or worse. The reason I myself find this interesting is because there is that other theory we talk about a lot, and that's the soul reaping. Some of these extraterrestrial entities are said to be after or actually carrying out during the abductions, regardless of what the individual experiences, which is always specifically unique to that person, regardless of how many similarities there actually are that are reported. What I'm saying here is, it's possible there is some sort of demonic aspect to all of this, but I'm not sure it's the reason for or end game for every single extraterrestrial race that comes down and either abducts or otherwise makes any sort of contact with us. How about another of our old buddies we've discussed here from time to time, Jim Penniston. This is one I brought to you guys fairly recently too. Jim was formerly in the United States Air Force and was a major witness in the widely known and often debated Rendlesham Forest UFO encounter that allegedly took place in December of 1984 in England. Penniston, who was a witness to the event, underwent hypnotic regression in order to recall possible screened, wiped, or even repressed memories. There were pieces missing, and he couldn't handle it anymore as normally something like what he saw that night and any interaction with otherworldly creatures, beings, energies, and or entities. It leaves a mark on our subconscious, and somehow the extraterrestrials who are constantly trying to use these methods on all sorts of human beings they're experimenting on or doing whatever it is that they're doing to with them haven't seemed to be able to figure out or possibly don't understand yet, meaning They can do all the screening and wiping they want, or at the very least they can try, and they definitely do. But the effects it has on our sub and superconscious minds is indelible, and we won't easily forget that. At least there is something there. So anyways, in 1994, he underwent hypnotic regression in order to recall these memories, and he claims that under hypnosis, he was able to draw the conclusion, or otherwise came to find out, that extraterrestrials are actually just human beings from some far-flung future we can't yet comprehend or understand. That's very fascinating to me, and at the risk of sounding repetitive, also something we have discussed here, albeit briefly so far, right on this channel. He had more information though, going on to say that our future, that is the future of humanity as a whole, is dark and somewhat incomprehensible. The human race is allegedly racked with all types of reproductive and emotional issues. This is something I talk about constantly, as I personally believe it is the main reason some species of extraterrestrials started abducting us and doing all of these horrific experiments on us in the first place. I am inclined to believe that they are blighted with reproductive issues as well, due to an over-reliance on technology, and in the process of this reliance, we lost our humanity, our emotions, and our ability to procreate because of it. According to this theory, they had to go underground as they had destroyed their planet, which was exactly the same, or at least extremely similar to Earth. If it wasn't Earth itself, but how that would work is for another type of video altogether that I will do at another time. So they had to go back in time, start all of these reproductive experiments, start hybrid and seeding programs, and abduct us in the dead of night from the presumed safety and comfort of our own homes and beds, because they absolutely must. It's a matter of their very survival as a species. So, are they beings from another planet? Are they human beings from another planet, or are they one or the other from here but in the future? People always ask, well, if they're from the future, then why don't they just go back in time and stop all of this with the technology? Or a variation of so many other random questions that make no sense, and I say that's because they probably do, right? I mean, that's most likely possible on some, possibly even most timelines, but I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole here, as I said before, and I'm just going to keep it moving. So back to Peniston, in short, he explains that future humans travel back in time in order to collect eggs, sperm, and other chromosomes in order to keep their species alive and hopefully to get themselves back to a place of thriving again. What do you guys think of all of this? I am anxious to see which theories you guys believe and which ones you think are just plain nonsense. To wrap this all up, is it possible that all of the scenarios I have given to you here are all correct? Most likely not. Is one or more even remotely near what's actually happening, or is it all nonsense and we haven't yet come close to even figuring any of it out? Is it something else entirely, or all of the above, or what? That's all for you guys to decide, because as I always say, I am not here to plant thoughts or change minds, simply trying to get you all thinking and open some minds a bit if I can. That's all I have for you today, guys. Please give this video a big thumbs up if you enjoyed hanging out with me, if you enjoyed spending this time with me, enjoyed the content, or just want to see me smile. Spread the love by sharing this video, and please subscribe if you haven't already. Got to get those views up, guys, so be sure to share out, be sure to watch the whole thing through, leave a comment, all of that great stuff that I know so many of you do in order to support me. Please check out the description box. I will leave links to some of the previous videos I've done on some of the topics we've discussed in this one video. There's a lot here, so maybe watching those videos could help you break it down a little bit. You'll also find ways to donate to the channel: PayPal, Cash App, Patreon, or if you want to send me a gift, my Amazon wish list gift link. There's now merch on my Patreon tier, so if you want to go in and check that out, just for giving a monthly donation, you'll get some sort of merch depending on which tier you're on, which I thought was pretty cool that they added that in there. Also, if you pledge $20 a month or more through Patreon, I will give you a monthly personal intuitive oracle reading as a thank you. All right. All three of my books, Missing the Fae Theory, Encounters with Evil, 101 True and Terrifying Stories, and Shadow Entities, Sleep Paralysis and Beyond, the Kindle and paperback versions available on Amazon. The links in the description box. And if you want autographed copies, please email me for any other correspondence, for information on personal readings, all of that good stuff, for information on manifestation and intention sprays. If you want to get a signed copy of one of my 2 issues from the Paranormal Press magazine, please hit me up for any of that at GemmaJadeParanormal@gmail.com. The crystal packets, the spiritual helper boxes, the manifestation intention sprays, the gel oil rollers, all of that stuff that I have for sale that a lot of you guys don't really know what that's about. I'd gladly explain it to you. GemmaJadeParanormal@gmail.com for all of that. Don't forget, Wednesday nights right here on this channel, myself and Ghost Dragon ZW will be streaming live intuitive oracle from 7:30ish p.m. Eastern time to 11:30ish p.m. Eastern time, or until we run out of people to read for. One card random pull from a random deck gives you a weekly reading free or for suggested donation only. And that's to help bring you guys more in line or in tune with what I do with Intuitive Oracle, because I'm going to be putting on my other channel, MoonBearOracle, and on this channel anytime Intuitive Oracle readings. So if I start putting them out, say next month, February 2023, it's going to be an anytime reading. So you can watch it in February 2023, but if 4 years from now you happen to come across that video, that's your message. And I really am being led to do that, guys. It'll be just me and the cards, no comments or anything like that. If you're not interested in Oracle, that's fine. Just don't watch those videos, because I'm still going to be putting out the same exact content. And as soon as I'm able to do it only on MoonBearOracle, I'm going to move everything over there. So lots of big, huge changes coming up. I'm working on my 4th book about the black-eyed kids. I have not titled it or named it yet. You can go to the Paranormal Press magazine.com to pick up either one of the issues with me. I believe it's issue 5, and I know definitely the newest one is issue 6, so you can do that. Again, if you want it signed, hit me up, GemmaJadeParanormal@gmail.com. My email information is in the description box as well. Also, the schedule changed a little bit again, so it's going to be Thursday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern time. We're doing chillax and chat. We're going to be bringing on you guys, people in the chat, our regular subscribers, anyone with something paranormal, supernatural, extraterrestrial, otherworldly, etc. want to come in, chat, audio or video, doesn't matter. We're just going to have a blast with it. And then Mondays at 11 a.m. Eastern will be the pre-recorded upload. That's what this is. I know I'm forgetting a ton of stuff. You guys know it'll eventually come out. I'll eventually remember it like 3 hours from now. Be kind to each other, guys. It doesn't cost anything. Never accept anything less than others being kind to you, but especially make sure you're kind to yourselves. If nobody told you today, you're beautiful, you're perfect just the way you are. You're amazing, you're capable, you can do anything you set your mind to. Abundance is your birthright as a human. You deserve respect, love, grace, dignity, and that's how you deserve to be treated. I believe in you. Yes, you can. Always go in grace. Smile at a stranger, beautiful soul, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.